Welcome everyone. Now, this is really for Warren. Warren requests that I bring my chief disciple. Right there he is. So, uh, bow. Right. Show people the extent of your great compassion. You see that? Look at that. There it is, spreading across the universe, blessing the meeting. And he's this. We don't quite know what he is, but whatever he is, he's so wise he actually doesn't say anything. That's not true. All right, well, sometimes he says things. It's very hard to tell. He's unpredictable. Okay, you'll wait in the wings, okay? Okay.
Well, with that, Harry, let's all bow to Venerable Zach.
Zag, yes. ZAG, right, there he is.
ZAG. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, what I'm going to be talking about Shirto's poem, The Thatched Hut. But I'm also going to be talking about Western poetry as well and some other things. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm really looking at the way we practitioners use words and rely on them and how we can get stuck and we can also free ourselves with words. It's this kind of interesting contradiction. You know how Lao Tzu said that those who speak don't know and those who know don't speak. And then another poet, well, I don't know if Lao Tzu was a poet, but Bourdieu said, Master Lao said that people who know don't speak and people who speak don't don't know. Right. Anyway, and it took him 5,000 characters to say that, right? So there's a real contradiction that I want to point out. So what I'm first concentrating on is the idea of song, right? Because if you read Shirto's poem, you might just simply disregard it. It just wouldn't even be in your radar. And I'm putting it front and center because I want to talk about what a song might be. So we're going to begin with, I'm going to share the screen and, wait, I got to stop for a second. Let me make sure my screen is where it should be. Here we go. Okay, now I can share the screen. Okay, everyone can see that? This is
Yep.
the, is it visible?
Yep. We can see it.
Okay, so there it is. Cao An Ge, that's Shitou Xiqian. So here's the ge, right there, and that means song, and the character actually has a lot of breathing involved in it. There's a little mouth in there, and the parts around it mean an exclamation, and the part on the right is about breathing out. So the poem is sent out into the world, right, through the song. So first I'm going to do a Western poem. These are some excerpts from Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. And Walt Whitman was not a Buddhist as far as I know, but he was a remarkably sensitive, insightful man, poet, and because I'm just going to read some of these lines. It's a very long poem. It's like 50 pages long, only a page of excerpts just to introduce the idea of song. So I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. So, like a good Buddhist, which he wasn't, he's already bringing his insight into song, and he's, in a sense, looking at things in a non-dualistic way, not suggesting any superiority or inferiority. Everyone is the same. So the delight alone, or in the rush of the streets, or along the fields and hillsides, the feeling of health, the full noon trill, the song of me rising from bed and meeting the sun. So this song becomes like just an expression of being, if you will. So it's not like this particular song has a melody. It's it's an exchange, of what he's experiencing, how he's experiencing it, and through the poem, he's sharing that with the world. And there's an understanding that the world is sharing it with him because that's what he is feeding off, his life. And this is where we are, this is our lives interacting with our friends, our relatives, people we like, people we don't like. And, we all have this kind of song. So there's an Arab proverb that says, a bird doesn't have a question, it has a song. So this is an expression of self, or non-self, if you will. So in me, the caresser of life, wherever moving, backwards as well as forward, slewing, which means turning, to niches aside and junior bending, not a person or object missing, absorbing all to myself for this song. And we're going to see some of this in Shirtou's poem, that nothing is missing. His awareness is complete. Funny, he uses the word patriarch. Patriarchs sit at supper with sons and grandsons and great-grandsons around them. In walls of adobe and canvas tents, rest hunters and trappers after their day's sport. The city sleeps and the country sleeps. The living sleep for their time. The dead sleep for their time. The old husband sleeps by his wife and the young husband sleeps by his wife. And these tend towards me and I tend outward to them. As such as it is to be of these, more or less I am. And of these, one and all, I weave the song of myself. So, it is really remarkable what he could feel intuitively about the sense of self, which is so important in our studies and teachings, the preoccupation with who we think we are. But here he's really expanding this to the world around him, both the living and the dead. And so now I will do nothing but listen, to accrue what I hear into the song, to let sounds contribute towards it. Not words of routine, this song of mine, but abruptly to question, to leap beyond, yet nearer bring. And that's a wonderful Buddhist kind of sentiment or sense of receptivity and pouring forth to leap beyond yet bring nearer. So the idea of distance is kind of interrupted, if you will. It's not what we normally think it would be. So that's all right. So that's the first introduction of a song from a Western poet. Now I'm going to do one more. This is a very short poem by William Butler Yeats, and it's called A Coat. And so here is the whole poem. I made my song a coat covered with embroideries out of old mythologies from heel to throat. But the fools caught it and wore it in the world's eyes as though they'd wrought it. Song, let them take it, for there's more enterprise in walking naked. Now, once again, Yeats was not a Buddhist either, and it's up to interpretation of what his coat might be. I think I'd be stretching it to say that his coat was Buddha nature. I wouldn't even stretch it that far, but the coat is, I'm sorry, the song, apologies. What his song is. The song is who he really is as far as he knows without the intercession of the world and other people's thoughts and his earlier training. It's like, who is he at the moment? But because of uncertainty and because of social conventions, he was afraid to let the world see who he was. So this is a metaphor. He made who he really is a coat. He covered himself up, and he covered it with embroideries out of old mythologies to impress people from heel to throat. In other words, he covered his whole being with this fabrication, if you will. But then the fools caught it, and we'll see this in Shirtou's poem of different sensibilities and different ways of seeing things. These people who don't really understand who he was or poetry, they caught it and they wore it in the world's eyes. They didn't see the inner meaning. And so then he says, song, let them take it. He's still got the song, right? For there's more enterprise in walking naked. So in this short poem, he's expressing the idea that he can be who he really is and he doesn't have to hide. Now, this is a long way from a Chan poem, but I bring these things up to show that there's a commonality between Buddha Dharma and our lives. As a matter of fact, Uchiyama Roshi said, and in his book on Dogen, that Buddhism is based on life. Right? That really hit me. Right? Not here are some rules or whatever that are kind of living by themselves. They're very they're academic. They're this or that. He didn't say that. He said Buddhism is based on life, and learning how you relate to the practice and the practice relates to you is what our path is. That's what he says. So now I'm going to go to the Song of the Thatched Hut. So this is my high school picture. Just kidding. But that's Shantaka Rakshita, who actually was instrumental in bringing Buddhism to Tibet. When I worked at the Reuben, one of the staff actually did this whole presentation for me. They put it in PowerPoint. Okay, so here's the first line. Uja Tsao An Ubao Bei. So I fastened together a grass hut, no worldly treasures here. One thing really interesting, first of all, he actually uses the character right here for I. You know, and you often don't see that in a lot of poems like this. And I think this will really see the usefulness and the import of what he's saying at the end of the poem. So this is a poem that would seem to be about a hermit, someone who is going through intense practice and is turning away from the world, but it's really not true. And so this is kind of a key that he's saying I, you know, a conventional I. Then the next character, Je, means to tie, and looking in my Buddhist dictionary, it means to bind or restrain. So to me, it's a little ironic that this is a poem about liberation, but he's using a character word that means to bind up. So there's kind of a little contradiction there. And then it's just a tsao an, a grass hut. And it says no treasure, it's really no worldly treasure. And that really is either a reference to or is very similar to something from the Gateless Gate, where the Gateless Gate introduction begins by saying Buddhism makes mind its foundation and no gate its gate. How do you pass through this gate? It is said that things coming in your gate can never be your own treasures. So that's what this is pointing to. There are no worldly treasures, nothing that the world would value, right? And it says further, what is gained from external circumstances will perish in the end. So this hut, this is a creation of the moment. And then my meal is finished, at ease, I sleep contented. And to my mind, this is really a reference to the koan with Zhao Zhou, when the monk asks him, or a monk comes to join the monastery, and Zhao Zhou asks him, have you eaten yet? And the monk says, yes. And then Zhao Zhou says, well, then wash your bowl. That koan to me is utterly profound because it contains wisdom and compassion, and causes and conditions. Like the whole universe is kind of in that koan. And at ease, that could be a reference to the formless verse in Huineng's Platform Sutra, where it says that, let's see. So if not abiding in mind, let's see, give me 1 second. Oh, when hate and love don't operate in the mind, then one can stretch out one's legs and rest. So this is showing that Shitou is in a state of completion, of fully practice, and he's at ease. Eaten also can mean that he has absorbed all of the Dharma teachings. That can also be a metaphor. So now we're off and running. So when the first built, the thatch seemed new. So that Cheng Shi means at the time of completion. And according to Guo Xingfa Shi, that doesn't just mean the hut, that means the completion of Shitou's practice. And this is there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Here he's first looking at the thatched hut, and it's new. And this is kind of a metaphor of beginning practice when you are idealistic, when you are sort of falling back on the things of the world. Right? But that doesn't last very long, because that time is sometime in the past when he had completed his practice and the hut. But now it's tattered, it's broken, and he's going to add more thatch. And that could be understood as he's going to practice more. He's going to not be thrown off by external things. It's not what is truly important to him. He's gone beyond, as you'll see, creation and destruction. And then he says, the one abiding in the hut is ever calm. So this character, to abide, sometimes it can be translated as support, and I like to translate it as identify with. So in this case, well, he's not identifying with anything, really. He's dwelling in the hut in a kind of equanimity, equipoise with the hut. And as you'll see, he's not really identifying with anything, because it's kind of like Tzu-Zai. It's like he's free. Oh, he's continually there. There's no motion of mind, right? And then he says, Bushu Jungjen Yu Nehuai. He's attached neither within, without, or in between. So he's outside of space and even time. And that second character, Shu, can mean belong to. It can also mean categorize. So he's beyond categorization. Whatever is going on is being pointed to in the poem, but we can't really name it. And then he says, worldly ones dwell where I do not. And once again, if you want to use the word identify, worldly ones identify with their surroundings. They're possessive. They're obsessed with the five worldly treasures of food and sex and sleep and fame and wealth. And then worldly ones crave what I do not. That character, the I, third character, is the character, of course, in modern Chinese, means love, right? But well, not just ancient Chinese or classical Chinese, but it's also the eighth link in the dependent origination. This is where craving begins, right? Once you've gone through the links in the chain to where the ignorance and mental formations and consciousness and name and form and the entry points of the senses, and then contact, and then sensations or feeling, and then when that arises, craving happens. So he's beyond craving here. It's not just, he's not craving what worldly people crave. He has entered the phase of wishlessness, which is like emptiness and goallessness or viewlessness. So now this is, if it wasn't apparent before, it's certainly apparent now that this hut is not any kind of hut that you could ever encounter in the world, because the small hut, right, encompasses all Dharma realms. That means his hut is everywhere in the universe, meaning, so you can ask, well, what is in the universe? Not necessarily his physical body, right? But his mind, the Buddha mind, is everywhere. And the practice, the hut, starts to become a pointer to and a metaphor of practice itself, of Buddha Dharma. That's why it encompasses all Dharma realms. So now, I'm always happy to hear anybody who has some comments on the translation, because some of this was quite difficult. These first two characters do mean the abbot's quarters, but they can sometimes mean the abbot, him or herself. So I fudged it a little and I made it into venerable. So in these venerable quarters, this old man penetrates relative and absolute. And the characters there are kind of embodiment and understanding. So to my mind, it's kind of Li, principle, and sure, phenomenon, noumena and phenomena. Any kind of experience, everything in mind and everything outside of mind. And then there's another, my early pictures. No, that's Yama, the god who has overcome death, holding up the wheel of life and death, which is a mirror, so you can see where your practice is. Where are you on the wheel of life and death? And it's a little too hard to see, but that craving is right here. That's the eighth link. This was a tanka in the Rubin Museum. Okay, so we can. That was a short commercial break for life and death. So now, so this is literally the superior vehicle. Could be understood as Mahayana, but could be understood as just a supreme level of practice. And there's bodhisattvas, and they're saying that they are their faith has no doubt. So there's nothing holding back Shitou's mind at this point. He's really gone beyond that, and like the poem "Faith and Mind" says, faith and doubt are one and the same. It's an expression of non-duality. And then here, and this is funny. This sort of harkens back to that Yeats poem I said, where the fools caught his song. I know I'm mixing apples and oranges in a way, but still it seems interesting to me. So the middle paths would be could be understood as the Shravakas or the Pratyeka Buddhas, and the lower paths would be worldlings, people who are not practicing at all. Um, so so this character at the end, Guai, means when they hear about what Shitou is doing, when they see his hut or they hear about it, this character means to give rise to. It's literally strangeness, or actually can be blame. They're pointing their fingers at him, which when I need someone to point a finger, I use Zag, pointing the finger, right? Because he's definitely one of the superior beings. Thank you. So so as suspicion infects the followers. That's just the way I put it. It's literally when they hear of what's going on, they are upset. You see this in a lot of sutras. It's in the Diamond Sutra, in the Lotus Sutra, in the Sutra of Complete Enlightenment, where these new teachings, the Mahayana teachings, are introduced, and people are shaking in their boots. And in the Lotus Sutra, in the second chapter, when the Buddha is about to announce these new teachings, 5,000 monks, nuns, and lay people walk out. So this is a definite trope, a theme that you see in a lot of Buddhist practice, showing that some people are really scared by the thing, ironically, which will cause their salvation, right? So continuing right along. So they wonder if this hut is damaged. And metaphorically, what that means is they think he's crazy. They think that this is like, if the hut is the metaphor for practice, they think that what he's practicing is just is broken, is damaged, is ineffective, right? And then notice he's not arguing against that, which once again shows the state of his mind. He says, damaged or not, the original master is ever abiding. Now that's when you can ask the question, who this or what the original master is. Most likely it's Buddha nature itself, or his original nature. Nothing is affected by worldly phenomenon, right? The original master is ever abiding, not affected by time or space. And he doesn't dwell in north or south, north, or east or west. I changed the order a little in the English, and it's interesting. There's a koan in the Blue Cliff record where someone asks Jiaozhou what he is, and Jiaozhou says, North Gate, South Gate, East Gate, West Gate. That's the whole koan. And you could meditate on that for a long time. In that koan, Jiaozhou is saying that he's accessible but not findable, if you will. And this is a different grammatical take on it, but Shitou is also saying that he can't be located. This is he's in the non-locatable state of realization, or nirvana. But he has an unsurpassable foundation, firm and fast. And this really makes me think of a short couplet from American poet Edna St. Vincent Millay, where she says, see the ugly houses safe upon the strand. Come see my shining palace built upon the sand. So in this case, what she's talking about, her shining palace, is her creativity, her song, if you will. And once again, just to bring up the song again in the poem, it's very good to ask the question of why Shitou was writing it. Now, of course, we can't find out, but there's certainly a possibility. Well, he's writing it, he wants other people to see it. It could be a particular student who is caught in some particular stage of practice and is maybe on the verge of a breakthrough, but they are still, their mind is still clouded with ignorance. So Shitou is writing this song. He's not, well, I'm pretty sure this thing wasn't set to music, but it's a song in this metaphorical way of like really spreading the Dharma out to the world. It's that kind of a song. So his foundation is unsurpassable, right? And now this is actually, interestingly enough, I didn't see this at first. I translated this poem about 10 years ago and then recently looked at it and redid it again for a variety of reasons. And this might seem like a throwaway line. You know, it's literally in Chinese, green pines under bright window inside. And so I gave it some English grammar. Among the green pines, the window brightens within. And to me, what this is emblematic of and indicative of is pure samadhi. This is like the 9th or 10th picture in the ox herding pictures, where the self is totally eradicated, and there's nothing but environment with no being to walk upon the paths in the environment. It's just environment. The Shitou is in a sense disappeared, at least in this line. Right? So now that we see the state that he's in, beyond time, beyond space, beyond the practice of Dharma, right? Just at one with the universe and beyond that oneness, if you will. Now he's talking a little bit about his situation and how content he is. He realizes that there is a world outside. So, like I said, it's interesting. Remember I said the poem began with the wu, the I. So there's still an I there, and you'll see this throughout the poem. This is what's so interesting about it. So, I mean, you could say he's boasting in a way, saying, you know, hey, look, I'm beyond all this stuff. But you could also say he recognizing it's there, and it has nothing to do with who he is and what he's doing. So it's it's literally Jade Palace and Vermilion Tower, and there's no actually could also be translated as opposition. You know, which maybe I should have. That might be actually what he's saying. So there is this world, the everyday, the world of samsara out there, and he's not in opposition to it. And he's using these tropes for royalty to really indicate kind of the top end of the world of samsara. Even the mightiest palaces and the power of the rulers in is nothing that affects him one way or another. And so now he's seated in a patched robe and with his head covered, and that head covered is a reference to Bodhidharma, right? Which is what Bodhidharma was famous for, having his head kind of covered like that. So, like that reference to the venerables, the abbots that came before him, or who are blessing his lineage, if you will. He's following in this tradition of Bodhidharma, who's following in the tradition of the Buddha. And the 10,000 things at rest. So in this particular line, this is really the realm of the absolute. There's no interference between dharmas. They don't get in their way. And that's also could be either a reference to or just a like-minded expression of what's in the formless verse, where dharmas do not interfere with one another. So a lot is going on in the poem in terms of like the worldly existing as the worldly, the absolute existing as the absolute, and then those are experienced and combined to a point where they're no longer, they're beyond the reach of words. So, so at this time, now we're in the present moment, and when you see this, like, I always like to think of the Heart Sutra. When the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara was coursing through the deep prajna paramita, there's the same character, that sure, meaning when, and that when is not in the Tang Dynasty. That when is right now, that this moment, right? We don't see it. We don't think of ourselves as mountain monks, right? But Shirto's practice is not pinned down to any time, past, present, or future. And so it's very interesting what it says. It doesn't say what my English translation said, which is encounters no thing and no one, but it implies it. It says everything is not met, everything is not encountered. And it really makes sense with the line above, where the 10,000 things are at rest. Things are no longer burdened by the identity that we give them. There's no question of things being emptiness. You don't even need the teaching of emptiness, because everything is what it is. So that's why he's not encountering anything, even though he could be passing trees and people and all sorts of things like that. But he's in such a state of non-duality that there's no interference, there's no naming, there's no opposition. And so once again, now dwelling in this hut, and by this time we know that this hut is not just the grass hut. He's talking about dwelling in like a Tathagata, in ultimate reality, right? And fabrication and understanding at rest. Not only is he not engaging in prapanka, mental proliferation, being a victim, if you will, of his own mind's projections, because he's no longer projecting anything. Even the sense of understanding in a worldly sense has now been abrogated. It is gone. So we're getting deeper into understanding what he's trying to sing about, what he's trying to tell us, this song. And so here it says, who would boast and set out seats to entice seekers? Probably in the Tang Dynasty, when he wrote this, actually I'm pretty sure there were all sorts of teachers who boasted of a variety of attainment and Evidently, some were charlatans and really hadn't attained what they claimed, and they measured their own success by getting students. And Shitou is beyond that, right? He doesn't need to entice seekers. That doesn't mean that people aren't coming to see him. It occurs to me. It just means he doesn't have to make this kind of an effort. Anyway, so and now he's saying, turn the light around, illuminate within, and then return. So the light is pure awareness, pure Buddha awareness. That's what he's talking about. That is all of our birthright. This is once again, I like to emphasize when you look at this poem, it's hard in some ways, but you're not reading about some foreign thing from another time, really. You're really reading about what's happening in this moment, but we don't really see it that way, most of us, right? We are just becoming aware of our light when we meditate. We get some sense that we have this unsullied awareness. And actually, one definition of right view is undefilable awareness, that our true Buddha nature, our ability to actually observe beyond using our senses, just with the true mind, can't be increased, decreased, not born, not destroyed, not impure or pure, beyond all sorts of categories. And then also one of the most important lines in the poem, Gui Lai, and then return. So in one sense, this right from the beginning character, Shitou has had one foot in the world of samsara and one foot in the world of nirvana, or in the relative and the absolute. So he's making sure that you don't get lost in this, in the bliss of enlightenment. He's saying you have to come back. You have to come back to the world. There's a responsibility in the Dharma, and that could be part of what he's doing in writing the poem in the first place. So here it says wide and far-reaching, the spiritual source. And he uses this character in another poem, which I'm going to do next month, the matching halves. This can really be understood as Buddha nature, the spiritual source. It's I don't see this as a standard in a lot of Buddhist writing, although it certainly occurs enough. But and also the its spiritual root. And one of my teachers explains that the way that our minds work is that we have a thought stream and we have a poison stream. All of our impurities, our outflows are sort of beneath what we're aware of, and then even beneath that is the roots of our affliction, which is what deepest practice aims at overturning. So this is the spiritual source. This is the source of the deepest practice and realization, right? And then, so once again, in terms of like the root, where do you find it? Well, it's not going to be found in a way that can really be describable. That's why it says, don't approach it or turn away, because nothing is going to bring you there. And reminds me of a quote from one of the sutras where there's a deva who asked the Buddha, how did you overcome the flood? And the flood means samsara. And the Buddha said, I found that when I moved forward or backwards, I got swept away, and if I stayed where I was, I sank down. So I neither moved nor stayed where I was. This reminds me of a quote from once again Zag. This is something that Zag helped me with. He helps with most of my jokes, right? Yeah, which is, don't worry. Inspector Clouseau from the Pink Panther movies, at one point in a very tense scene, he says, "There is a time to act and there is a time not to act." And this is not one of those situations. So that's from Peter Sellers, the comedian. So here we are, you know, he's identifying so many parts, or not identifying, that's probably the wrong word. He's pointing to the, for lack of a better word, the parameters of his practice. And so now he's even reaching back further. He's saying, come meet the patriarchs, the ancestral teachers, the patriarchs and the teachers, you know, the Shakyamuni himself, if you will. And then he's saying, you know, intimately follow their teaching, heed their teachings. So he's not turning his back on Dharma, by the way. He's really promoting it, but in a very, very deep, deep way of not just, you know, words and phrases and scriptures, but really looking into the heart. And so now the poem is now, that was this line, the poem is sort of turned on its axis, if you will. So now it's, first there's an invitation, come meet the ancestral teachers, intimately hear their teachings. And then there is an exhortation, fasten together a grass hut and do not regress. So and sort of don't give rise to doubts. Have faith in yourself. This is, you know, if I can do it, you can do it, right? I mean, he's a pretty heavy hitter, right? But that's the message. This is obtainable by all of us. And then he says, now this is a line I agonized over translating this line. And I spoke with Rebecca Lee and with Guoxing Fasher, and I came up with what I have here, and they both said, that's fine. So I'm going with it. What it says literally is 100 years thrown away, and then you can, I guess, allow yourself to be unbound and at ease. And so this is what I interpreted it to be, is like, cast aside the life you think you have. That is, you've been banging your head against the wall, going in the wrong direction for your whole life, he's sort of saying, maybe to a student. And now you really have to turn things around, turn the light around, and progress in the right way. And then doing this, being in this practice, you are unbound and at ease. You know, so this is realization and release. And then further explaining how free one can be in this, he says, literally, swing your arms freely and walk. You know, it's like, he doesn't say and start whistling a tune, but it's almost like that. Freely swing your arms, and there's no blame. You're beyond any kind of transgression. There are no rules for you to break. And this reminds me of a famous quote from Confucius, which begins at 15, I established myself in study, and at 45, someone may know this better than me, I understood the mandate of heaven, and and then I could hear freely. And the last part is when I was at 70, I could do whatever I want, and there would be no transgressions. Very different practice, Confucianism, Buddhism, but sort of similar. It's like when you're finally at a point when you don't have to follow the precepts because they become part of you. There are no guidelines remaining because you yourself are a guideline. And then it says, so this is a warning now about getting caught up in language and instruction, right? Interestingly enough, from a poem, which is language and instruction. Well, life is full of contradictions. So 1,000 instructions, 10,000 interpretations, right? So you could knock yourself silly with going to Dharma talks and listening to this Dharma teacher and that Dharma teacher and believing that somehow you're going to hear a word or two that's going to make everything click. So he's saying beware. And so he said, they serve only to teach you to always stay clear of confusion, but they don't really tell you how to get past confusion, how to make confusion dissolve by seeing the emptiness of confusion. And then this is really so interesting how the poem ends. So now, in a sense, he's coming back to the I in the beginning of the poem, but it's a different I, a different self, I have to admit. But so if you want to know the undying person, literally, who's in the hut, and this undying person, by the way, is you and me. That's what he's really pointing to. And it's the person who is absolutely at one with themselves, with the practice, with understanding and what's beyond understanding. It's and beyond life and death, right? So yet there is the abiding in the hut, right? The world is still here, but the world of samsara is not a problem. And then, so the last line, it says, how can you possibly separate from this skin bag here and now? This actually, there's the Rohitasis Sutra, where a deva has been traveling around the universe. It'd be nice if we could do that right. I mean, Zag has that power, as you can see. I just wanted to show the one end of the universe to the next. Quick, right? Anyway, a deva is traveling around the universe, and he's trying to find the end of suffering, right? And the Buddha says to the deva, the end of suffering, the cause, the understanding, and the end of suffering is found right here in this 6-foot carcass. The Buddha was a little taller than I am. My carcass isn't quite 6 feet. But that's what the poem is telling you, that everything you need to know is right here. You don't need anything from outside yourself, and there is no boundary to who you really are. That's how the poem ends. And to contrast that, I have another poem, and I'll explain why I'm contrasting it, which is The True Nature of Equality by Fu Dasher. And this poem is very short, and every time, actually I have a translation here, but every time I read it, I translate it again. And this is a poem of true completion. And notice there's no I in this. So, working with a hoe, my hands are empty. Riding an ox, I walk at leisure. We are all passing over the bridge repeatedly. The bridge flows, the water does not. Now, and the reason I put this at the end is I want to make a suggestion that this character, Qiao, which is the character for bridge, is utterly identical to the hut in Shirtou's poem. In other words, it's flowing, it's boundless, it's inside and outside of time. And then once again, in translating this, it's literally the character on the left is people. It could be, you know, you or others, or I don't know. I thought we was the best in this particular thing. But so we are all passing over the bridge repeatedly, and we're not seeing the bridge as it really is. We think, I guess this poem is actually saying we think we're crossing from one thing to another, but there really is no crossing, because everything that we think about a bridge and water is turned upside down at the end of the poem. The bridge is flowing, the water is not. And of course, the bridge is indicative of people and their futile efforts in samsara. It's the bridge, like the hut, right? It gets damaged. The bridge needs repair. The bridge will eventually fall down. But the water, which is indicative of the four elements, right? It's not just water, it's earth, wind, fire too, right? Those are always present, I mean, on a certain level, because they're part of true nature. They are, but at a very abstract level. Anyway, so that's it, and there we are. See how happy we are at the end? Two bodhisattvas, and that's Avalokiteshvar in his Pure Land. I thought that's a good way to end. So that's it. That's my presentation, and let me stop the share.